And I'm, I have 15 minutes until I have to put my autistic person to bed. And I was thinking, what am I going to talk about tonight? We're going to talk about camp safety. Because for people that their kids go to summer camp, I got a postcard in the mail maybe 3 days ago from Camp Trinity. And they were saying sign up's getting ready to happen. You know, there's all these, like, if you do summer camp and you've been to the summer camp before, you get priority to sign up for the summer camp. So some summer camps, like if you've been 2 years in a row, you get to register on a certain day. So there's this hierarchy of sign up. And it's sign up time right now for summer camp. And as obviously we've been talking about Camp Mystic and thinking about Camp Mystic's plans to reopen, and what happened last July, I think even if you said to me nothing had happened, I think this discussion is more about, well, that's not true. But what do you do now? How do you know what is safe? So you hear people saying, well, my kids will go back to Camp Mystic. We have to get back to normal. But I would argue that safety really does matter. And one of the best ways to know that you're safe is that your camp is accredited, or that there are real emergency plans. You can see all those things. And now there's a new law in Texas where you are allowed to access those things. But I was reading, I've shared a lot of things that parents have said and written, and I was reading a little bit from this director of the Association of State Floodplain Managers, Chad Burgenis, and he was talking about how in the Texas Hill Country, there were these regulatory camp gaps, is what he called them. And I thought that was really interesting. The Association for the State of Floodplain Managers is a scientific and educational nonprofit organization dedicated to reducing flood loss across the country. These regulatory camp gaps left campers vulnerable. He said we need to have very good, very precise emergency action procedures. You need to have clear action levels and specific actions written in language. And those need to be shared with local first responders. Really important. And about a half dozen on the Guadalupe, including Mystic, had shared their emergency plans with the county. But in the case of Mystic, the plans really were not, they were called emergency under flood, but they weren't, there was no action. And it said, the last sentence of the emergency plan said, the emergency instructions stated, quote, all cabins are constructed on high, safe locations. And it's hard for me to wrap my mind around, and it's not trying to like pit people against other people, but that sentence makes me so freaking sad. Like, you know, everybody's like, well, they didn't know, and how would they have known? But like, they followed their emergency instructions, which said, stay in your cabin. And to say all cabins are constructed on high, safe locations, Camp Mystic lost 6 cabins in a flood. Like, this has happened. 6 cabins at Camp Mystic were washed away in a previous flood. Dick Eastland was appointed by the governor on the Guadalupe River Authority in 2022. I shared a video last week that was in 2017 that talked about what to do if you're in a flood. Never, ever, ever get in a car. Dick Eastland was found with 3 campers in his car. And the River Authority said, if there is a foot of water, your car will float. 2 feet of water, your car will flip. If you are trapped and there is water, You have a better chance of survival by not getting in the car. Just really, really important. Catherine was actually, we're not going to talk about her. I'm going to read you a letter that a dad wrote. And he did not lose a child at Camp Mystic, but he wrote this letter. And I thought it was really good. He said, I'm a father of 3 young daughters that were all at Camp Mystic this past June for the first term and finished camp just a week before the terrible flood happened. My youngest daughter, who is 8 years old, was in the twins' cabin just a week earlier. My wife and I loved Camp Mystic and everything it stood for, but I'm angry at the situation and I hold the owners of Camp Mystic and the county officials accountable. Number 1, the county and camp owners knew this was one of the worst flood areas in the state. Shame on us parents for being so trusting and not doing our homework. So much so that the camp owners and county officials spent several years trying to get free government grants. Dick Eastland was on and off the board of the Colorado River Authority to put warning systems in place. Obviously, if you're advocating for warning systems every year, you recognize there could be a very bad problem one day. Don't you think at the very least you could have spent a few $1,000s to put walkie-talkies in each cabin so they could communicate with each other in an emergency? The camp has some of the wealthiest families and alumni in the state supporting it. Raising money would have been no issue whatsoever. The camp also makes millions in revenue per year, $7,500 per camper and 700 campers per session. Comes to $13.5 million a summer. The county is happy to take all of our money in tax revenue from the thousands of parents who stay in hotels, eat meals, and buy stuff to support the camps, but they couldn't put a warning place in system to protect thousands of children every year. 2, the camp owners had terrible policies and procedures in places that were outdated. I have seen them. Those policies told the counselors to stay in place in the cabin no matter what. The camp owners had experienced floods in the past. 3, I am a real estate developer and I fully understand the impact of owning commercial structures in a flood zone and the inability to get insurance to cover them. However, there was no way I would ever feel good or even justified to go ask FEMA to overlook the law so that we could leave the cabins in the flood zone, not to mention a floodway, which is the worst location possible, much worse than a flood zone. This is inexcusable, ridiculous, selfish, and reckless to put children's lives at risk so that you could get insurance policies on your cabin in case something happens to them like a flood. Guess what? That's exactly what happened. 4, the owners of the camp knew there were going to be heavy rains. They received the warning messages beginning on July 3rd, and they could have at least had somebody watching the river or paying attention to make sure the water was not rising. Do I feel bad that Dick lost his life? Of course, but let's not make him a martyr. He did what he had to do and what he should have done, considering that his camp's poor preparation and lack of safety controls put all our girls' innocent lives in danger. Sorry, make no mistake, the Eastlands were running a multi-million-dollar business that they profited from that was based on taking care of our kids. This is no charity. And they keep saying it's a mission. You know, they're opening back up this summer, and they talk about the mission. This was a for-profit million-dollar business, which that's fine, but don't pretend that it's not. Oh, it's a mission. We love, camp, and it's so important to have the Christians, but we didn't spend $70,000 to put the warning in place. Here come the turds out from I've got all the, oh good, my people are getting people in. I think it's completely ridiculous. So this was before the law passed. And the dad is saying, I think it's ridiculous. There are people actually advocating against a camp safety bill because their camps would have to spend money to upgrade infrastructure, including moving cabins out of flood zones. Are you kidding me? What if it was your daughter that died? I know one of the families who did lose their daughter, and while my wife and I were flying to Europe on the 4th of July and receiving all the text messages from all the parents that we know, the only thing my wife and I could do was feel so sad for these families, but so grateful that our daughters had just left the camp a week earlier. Such mixed emotions. So Catherine, I think it's Ferruzzo. People are very quick to correct my pronunciations because I guess they can't actually argue with what I'm saying, so they pick other things to be annoyed about. Catherine was a counselor, and her parents didn't speak at the Senate hearings, but they did publish an editorial in the Austin American Statesman. And one thing they said was that in Catherine's things, Catherine drowned, the staff training manual was in her things. And the parents said, in the last couple weeks, Catherine would have been participating in Sorority Rush at UT and preparing to run home to Pearl Street on midday. And she didn't get to do that. John and Andrea. The manual that was in their daughter's things, again, reads for those campers in higher cabins away from the water. In case of flood, all campers on Senior Hill must stay in their cabins. They will be given instructions through the loudspeaker. If the electricity is off, a walkie-talkie will be used, and that all campers must never wander away from their cabin. But for the Mystic staff, like Catherine, caring for younger staffers in the flats, the cabins closest to the river, the instructions were much different. Well, I don't know if they're that much different, but equally terrible. Those on the flats must also stay in their cabins unless told otherwise by the office. All cabins are constructed on high, safe locations. So this is from her parents. And this was, they wrote this earlier this summer in Texas Monthly. Feeling anxious and a little nervous, we arrived in Austin last Thursday, just like we had been planning since February, when our daughter Catherine, Amos, shush, learned she was accepted into the University of Texas. But instead of moving Caddy into Hardin House, the historic girls' dorm in West Campus, we were visiting the state capitol to plead for greater oversight and safety at summer camps throughout Texas. Catherine, just 19, was among the 27 girls who died at Camp Mystic on July 4th when the Guadalupe River exceeded its banks. Along with her co-counselor in the Bubble Inn cabin, Catherine stayed with her campers. That must have taken tremendous courage as the floodwaters rose, but it comes as no surprise to us. It was entirely within Catherine's character to be courageous and steadfast. Now again, Catherine was in the flats in the Bubble Inn cabin, and what her staff manual said, those on the flats must also stay in their cabins unless told otherwise by the office. All cabins are constructed on high, safe locations. Amos, could you maybe not be loud? Thank you. It was certainly within Catherine's character to be courageous and steadfast. She stayed with her campers. To be certain, her death was heroic, but it was also 100% preventable. These are Catherine, the counselor's parents. Catherine's trunk survived and was returned to us. Inside, among her sodden belongings, was Camp Mystic's training manual. On a page entitled Emergency Instructions, under floods, it reads, in case of flood, all campers on Senior Hill must stay in their cabins. They will be given instructions through the loudspeaker. If the electricity is off, a walkie-talkie will be used. Food and other supplies will be delivered to Senior Hill by boat or truck. Campers and counselors never wander away from your cabin. Those on the flats must also stay in their cabins unless told otherwise by the office. all cabins are constructed on high, safe locations. We believe Catherine stayed true to her character to the very end, but she and her fellow Mystic campers were failed by flawed policies.
Hey, Mommy.
Hi.
Hi there.
Hi. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, but do not make me be quiet.
She and her fellow Mystic campers were failed by flawed policies, inadequate safety procedures, and a severe lack of planning. So when we're thinking about camp safety and Camp Mystic's plans to reopen, every parent, whatever they think, you need to be asking questions about safety. I would not put my $7,800 down until I knew what the plan was. You know, it sounds cute and fun. Camp Mystic Lake, which had some flooding, Camp Mystic Cypress Lake. Their cabins are named Snuggle Inn, Sweet Dreams, Ladybug Lodge, Joyful Noise, Rainbow Ridge, Dewdrop Inn, Heaven's Loft, Lakeside, Cliffhanger, Heaven's Loft? No thanks. In terms of prevention, Catherine had a huge heart and a special gift for caring for children. If able, she would have kept her campers out of harm's way, but she could not protect them when their cabin, constructed in the flats, was not safely located as she had been assured. This was no high safe location. We simply must prevent camps from placing cabins in known floodplains like her Bubble Inn cabin. Detection. Catherine was smart and quick-witted, but she couldn't act on information that was never communicated to her. Counselors did not have phones or even walkie-talkies. There were no instructions through the loudspeaker. Going forward, there must be more advanced early detection and notification of worsening conditions along rivers and lakes, and camps need to be equipped with a far more effective internal communication system. Training. Catherine could be outspoken and quick to carve her own path, but she was also obedient and followed instruction. She was going to adhere to the directions she was provided. Those instructions were to stay in place. Every camper and counselor in Bubble Inn died for following the camp's policy. Now I'm going to read that again. This is Catherine's parents. Every camper and counselor in Bubble Inn died for following the camp's policy. So this wasn't about we didn't know. Everybody planned this. This was about a bad policy that was followed. Like if you had, like what if your fire code was, if there is a fire, stay in the cabin. It was that bad. Camps must be required to provide better, more comprehensive training to counselors, especially on effective evacuation plans. Camp owners, directors, and personnel must also be trained for various scenarios so they can pivot from standard practices when conditions warrant. And again, I would tell you, if you choose a camp that is accredited by the American Camp Association, they do this. There is an entire week of training at Camp Seagull, Camp Seafair, Camp Trinity, Camp Don Lee. A week of training. Camp Cheerio. I'm naming all the ACA camps my kids have gone to. Camp Ridgecrest. Response. Catherine was resourceful and resilient, but she was also trusting. If she could not keep her campers safe, she would have expected responsible adults to have her back. Camps must be better equipped to respond appropriately to changing conditions, and they must require emergency management to formally trigger a campsite response when a situation warrants. The manual reads for the campers in higher cabins away from the water. In case of flood, all campers on Senior Hill must stay in their cabins. But for the Mystic staff caring for the younger staffers in the flats, the cabins closest to the river, the instructions were the same. Those on the flats must also stay in their cabins unless they are told otherwise by the office. So Camp Mystic sent this email out last week, and it said this: our decision to partially reopen areas of the camp is informed by our faith and our commitment to continue the nearly century-long mission and ministry of Camp Mystic to provide a Christian camping experience for girls that allows them to grow physically, mentally, and spiritually. Search operations are ongoing at Camp Mystic. We continue to pray that SEAL will be found and for the peace and comfort of the families of all the campers and counselors. You know, are they ready to have former campers back and there's a rainstorm? Like, I would imagine there's serious PTSD. Serious PTSD. And do you feel comfortable having the Eastland family in charge? And no offense, but like, there's something to having an education in this area and not being family owned. You know, families owning a business doesn't, it's probably why the third generation usually loses the money, right? Just because your family doesn't mean you know what you're doing. In that case, then you say, you know what, I'm going to get accredited and I'm going to figure out what to do. And that is helpful, right? Because somebody is going to help me develop a flood plan. And the flood plan is not going to just be to say all cabins are on high, safe locations. That, no matter what you think, that was a lie. And if you want to send me one of your emails, go right ahead. But you tell me how that was not a lie. Tell me how 6 cabins washed away in a flood at Camp Mystic, but this was unexpected. Not everyone can be as smart as you. I know. It's so hard, isn't it? Jeb Common. Goodbye. Camp Mystic victims' families, 26 families, said, we call on Camp Mystic to halt all discussion of reopening and memorials. Instead, SEAL must be recovered, and you must fully confront and account for your role in the events and failures that caused the deaths of our daughters. We were not consulted about and did not approve the memorial Camp Mystic emailed us about yesterday. At this time, we believe all resources should be focused on reuniting SEAL with her family. And Catherine's parents said this: for many Texas families, summer camp is a generations-long tradition. And certainly it can be a positive and formative part of a child's life. It was for Catherine. We owe it to her and the 26 other daughters lost at Camp Mystic to make it better now. Jeff Carr, who was the family spokesperson, first told the Washington Post that evacuations began at camp at 2:30 in the morning after they were moving canoes. But then later he walked back the timeline, said after he talked to the family, the evacuations began closer to 2 a.m. Now the warning came in at 1:14 a.m. So there were 46 minutes before they started evacuating. And I don't know why it's hard to just confront truth. You know, like, there's a reason I quit smoking, right? Because I knew if I get lung cancer, everybody's going to be like, too bad for you, you smoke, right? And I bet if I get lung cancer in 20 years, they'll be like, you used to smoke. You smoked when you were 20 for 10 minutes. That's why you got it. So I decided, whatever I do, I'm going to do it to the best of my ability, so that no matter what happens to my children, if something terrible happens to me, that I can look my family in the eye and say, I did the best I could. You know, I have a child off at college, and I've done the best I can to raise him to make good decisions. Will feel no guilt over a decision he makes because I've really tried. And so in this case, there's guilt. There's bound to be guilt. And I think families feel guilty. I would assume that the camp owners feel guilty. But instead of people just saying, we really effed up, we just thought, we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't write an emergency plan. It was terrible. We just were comfortable in nothingness. And we could have saved your children. If we had started at 1:14 a.m., nobody would have drowned. And that is the truth. That is absolutely the truth. Because I was looking at this another camp's emergency plan, and basically 2 adults are assigned to go to each cabin to evacuate. So instead of Dick and the night watchman and his son-in-law, who I guess maybe was the director and Dick was the owner, Edward, like Edward drove some people around, but like, where were all the other adults? You would have a plan in place of like, everybody now, and it's done, right? Because it's not just 3 adults evacuating hundreds of children. You know, I think if there is a lawsuit, when there is a lawsuit, we're really going to learn more about what happened that night. And I think it's going to really be sad. It's going to be sad. And it is hard to deal with sad things. And it is hard to address that, you know, what about the drunk driver that kills a child? For the rest of their life, they can't just say, well, I didn't know the child was going to be on the road. You know, I didn't know it was going to be busy. I didn't know that beer was going to make me that drunk. You know, it wasn't my fault. It wasn't my fault. Carr told the Washington Post evacuations began at 2:30 a.m. Walked back the timeline began closer to 2 a.m. He said the timeline was pieced together on the accounts of family members who assisted in the evacuation and Camp Mystic's night watchman. Based on a preliminary timing of events, Eastland began moving campers to higher elevation at 2 a.m. as the situation began to deteriorate. According to Carr, Eastland began communicating with his family members over walkie-talkie shortly after the first alert to begin assessing the scope of the rising waters. So at 1:14 a.m., they said, shortly after, he began talking to the family members. When they began to see the extent of the floodwaters, they began the process of moving campers from low-lying cabins to the rec center. Safety matters. And you know, it only takes one. I remember my dad's business partner's son was killed in a motorcycle accident. And we were never allowed to get on a motorcycle. To this day, I've never been on a motorcycle. And because Stuart Stroud was killed on a motorcycle. And you might say, well, motorcycles are, but they are dangerous. You know, there are things that are dangerous. Thought they moved canoes first. They did move canoes first. Well, that was according to another timeline, but also given by Jeff Carr, who was the family spokesperson. He said before, let's see what it said. Let me see here. Um, Jeff Carr on July 15th said Dick had been tracking the weather. Counselor Laney Owens came from Bug House, and because there was water on the floor, she went to the camp office and notified staff that the flooding was becoming dangerous. This is the counselor, child counselor, and they needed to start evacuating cabins. That's when the owner, Dick, and his son, Edward, told the girls at Bug House to grab pillows and blankets. They would pile the girls into their cars and head to the rec hall. As they typically do in bad weather, Eastland directed the camp's canoes out of the river and brought them to higher ground. But they soon realized this storm was different. They rushed to evacuate the cabins closest to the river, Bug House, look in, and hang out, proactively assessing, Dick Eastland said. The flash flood warning was commonplace, and, quote, they had no information that indicated the magnitude of what was coming, said Jeff Carr. They got a standard run-of-the-mill National Weather Service warning that they've seen dozens of times before. They started moving campers to higher ground when they saw the floodwater. The zoning board, I believe, is also at fault. It's just hard for me to understand how you can be on the river authority and argue, like, what Catherine's father is saying, or not Catherine's father, the dad of the 3 girls at camp the week before the first session of camp. So there were 2 sessions, first session, second session. And he said, you know, how can you argue for camp safety, but then pretend you don't know you were in danger? It wasn't like you were like, we don't need camp safety. We ain't in any danger. We got no problems. That would go along with not doing anything. So to be begging for camp safety, then it doesn't make sense. I don't think they cared more about the canoes than the girls. I really don't. I think they were so clueless. I don't think they had, I think if they had been accredited, that would not have been their safety plan. And if someone makes you do a better safety plan, my hope would be that you would follow it. You know, if your cabin is in the flats, we will watch the National Weather Service. I mean, that's what the other camp down the way did. They had a plan for that. You know, there was a historic flood in 1978, 1987, in the 1930s. Anyway, just being proactive. But you're right. I mean, there's nothing that can be done now, but it just disappoints me for families who lost children to just feel so sad and unheard and ignored. It's like life is supposed to go on and they're supposed to just suck it up and everything's going to be wonderful and Camp Mystic is wonderful and it needs to open and we need healing. And I would say to you, is Camp Mystic safe? Is it safe? It's not accredited. It will not be accredited by this summer. Not Camp Mystic Cypress Lake. Not accredited. So if you think, you know what, I'm going to spend my $7,800 and I'm going to put my daughter in one of these cabins, and I feel perfectly good about that. Perfectly good. Snuggle in, Sweet Dreams, Ladybug Lodge, Joyful Noise, Rainbow Ridge, Dewdrop Inn, Lakeside Cliffhanger, Heaven's Loft. Just use your best sense. Don't put your child in danger. Not at Camp Mystic, not at any camp that's not accredited. You wouldn't put your child in a car with someone drinking. You know, that ship has sailed. We used to see pictures, babies would lay on their chest and their dads would be smoking. Normal people don't do that anymore. When you know better, you do better, or you should do better. And we know better. I hope Camp Mystic knows better. If Camp Mystic said, we would really like to open, we don't know how that works. This is our family's livelihood. This is our business. This is how we pay our bills. We have a camp. We need help getting this camp running and safe. What are we going to do that? We're going to tell you what we're going to do. We're going to start the accreditation process right now. We are not going to be able to open this summer because we're not accredited. Edward's going to go down and stock groceries at the food line. Tweety's going to go, take in sewing. Everybody's going to do what they need to do to pay their bills to get this camp up and running and safe. But instead, that's not what's happening. Instead, no one's talking about safety at all. Not even, nothing. Nothing. What they said, what Camp Mystic said was this. Our decision to partially reopen areas of the camp is informed by our faith and our commitment to continue the nearly century-long mission and ministry of Camp Mystic to provide a Christian camping experience for girls that allows them to grow physically, mentally, and spiritually. Search operations are ongoing at Camp Mystic. We continue to pray that Seal will be found and for the peace and comfort of the families of all the campers and counselors. So that's like 8 blips of faith in a sentence. That will make people not be Christians. I mean, you just cannot hide behind a business by pretending it's a mission. I mean, I have never seen so many GoFundMes for millionaires in my life. It is truly nuts. Truly nuts. I mean, GoFundMe after GoFundMe after GoFundMe. I mean, there's even like a GoFundMe to give Tweety a painting of Dick. It's like $8,000 or $9,000. Oh, we're gonna have this amazing artist. Everybody give money so we can give Tweety this Christmas present. What? What? I don't see it. Like, I don't see any GoFundMe for like, what can we do for Janie's family? Maybe we should give to Catherine. They're giving money to special needs children. She really enjoyed working with them. Like, those are your GoFundMes, in my mind. Yeah, GoFundMes. Just checks. I mean, there was a check for $19,000, $18,000 written to Camp Mystic. And meanwhile, families are burying their children. They had to bury their children. And Camp Mystic sent them a check back with the child's name on it and gave them their $7,800 back. And they didn't get their child back. There wasn't a note that said, I'm so sorry that you're still looking for your child. I'm so sorry you had to bury your child. Nothing. Not even a note. Just a check. Well, and then a piece of stationery that was clearly printed and made in nice, heavy cardstock. But no note. No phone call to these families from Tweety. No phone call since the morning of the flood. And that phone call was, hey, give me a call back when you can. Not urgent, not anything. Something you might think if somebody had a peanut allergy, maybe they, stumbled on a peanut.
What is this name?
No note? If you were watching a video of mine and my mother was watching and you said, I lost a child, my mother would respond this, please send me your address. I want to send you a book. And my mother would write you a note. Of my followers, particularly my subscribers, I bet my mother has given 40 books to people that needed it. These are not people that she was responsible for, but it's because she's a good human. Like that's what you do, right? When you're a good human. And I know I'm gonna get more emails. This negative narrative isn't necessary. Let's just honor those that have passed. This is a clickbait post. You don't know the Eastlands. You're in North Carolina. I was a debutante. We have more class than you. Just on and on and on. All because people feel uncomfortable with talking about what happened. Blake Bonner said, this was not an act of God. Could there be a clause in paperwork that the parents sign that doesn't allow the parents to sue the camp? I don't think so. I think that's like if you break an arm. It's like when you're behind a truck and it has a sign that says not responsible for broken windshields. It actually is responsible for broken windshields. Just because you say you're, like if you were drunk and you put a sign in your car and said, I'm drunk, if I hit you, it's not my fault. It doesn't mean it's actually not your fault. So there you go. But I'm going to keep talking about Camp Mystic. I talk about it every week, one night a week. Camp Mystic night. Yep. So there you have it. Because I care about camp safety. It doesn't matter that I don't live in Texas, or that I wasn't a Texas debutante, or that my mother and my grandmother and my dear sissy, sibby, aunt did not go to Camp Mystic. I'm still allowed to give an opinion. Yes, I am. And I'm allowed to advocate for families who are heartbroken. So there's that. Thanks. Coffee chat in the morning.